Well, hey, everybody, if you run a business, you probably are struggling at some level or another with ultimate execution and the ability to consistently, reliably scale a function or a process. If that describes you, I've got some good news. We've got a great show coming up. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense with your host, Doug Thorpe. Here's Doug.
Well, hey, everybody, this is Doug Thorpe, and you're listening to another episode of Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Today, my guest is going to help us explore the world of operations inside your business. It is an area that we have kind of pinged off of. We've taken a few tangential moments in the prior shows, but we've never dedicated a show to this. And today we're going to do just that. My guest is a gentleman named Garrett Delph. Garrett, welcome to the show.
Hey, Doug. Thank you so much. Really happy to be here.
So, Garrett, you have an organization, a company now called Clarity Ops, but give us a quick backstory. Why that, and what does that mean?
Sure. I'm happy to share. I thought, but by the way, what does it mean? I really did spend some time thinking about the name of the company, and clarity is there by design, because I think when we are clear, great things happen. The ops part really is its primary focus, and as that relates to my backstory, I've been building businesses for right around 25 years, and was an accidental entrepreneur. So I didn't really go in knowing business except for what I learned in corporate America. And what I determined is our growth and scale and profit and ultimate even culture health always led back to how was the business operating. And if it was operating well, we had great outcomes. And if it wasn't, there was a ton of pain to all function of the business, all people in the business, and ultimately our goals were always thwarted. And so, as I pursued really looking into that, I realized that mostly operations are in business, at least in the networks I was running in, are sorely ignored. We focused on revenue, we focused on sales, marketing, but the engine room of the business, which Carnegie Hall Dale Carnegie, referred to as the engine of success, was very often ignored. And for me, it turned out I happened to love it, and I did fall in love with it, and really intrigued by what great engine rooms in business can produce, and how it benefits the people and the business. And so that's what Clarity Ops focuses on now.
And I think when we talk about that, I think much has been written and said, particularly in the small business world, that says if you don't have process, procedure, and systems, you cannot scale, because a small business can't perpetually do one-off jobs and scale that, because you don't have training for your people as you add staff. You don't have consistent, measurable outcomes to know whether or not you're supporting a profit margin.
Yeah.
Because when you're doing the one-offs, you may throw in a little extra ingredient here and there, and you may burn some materials that you don't otherwise burn on a job. And that project may not have the same profit margin that others do. And when you put it all together, all of a sudden you've missed a target that you were shooting for. But with the right operations, systems, process, and procedure, and please correct me if you think there's something else there, you're never going to hit that reliable, sustainable profit margin management that you want to have in your business.
Yeah, I do agree with you. I do agree with you. And there are a lot of moving parts there. And I think actually, because of that, because of the complexity of running a business engine, operationally. I think that's why it's often ignored, and we just sort of continue to jump out of the plane and build our wings on the way down, and then we crash and we get back in the plane and fly back up. You know, but when the business can stop and address the complexity, I think the ROI on that investment, I really have seen it, and so I believe it. The ROI is worth it.
Well, having been in both worlds, the entrepreneurial and the larger corporate, what I see in this matter probably would plot out as a little bit of a dumbbell curve, hand weight, big ends and one handle in the middle. And
Yeah.
what I mean by that is on one end, you've got the smaller business who tends to go through the startup phase. They're kind of perfecting methodology. They're tinkering with the process. They're trying to lock in on a sustainable operation. But there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of noise that goes with that, and sometimes pain and effort to get there, and a lot of trial and error. So there's all that kind of activity in the smaller business.
Yeah.
The challenge is to come out of that and get into a sustainable operation that can again hit the revenue and margin targets you want. On the other end of that dumbbell, on the big corporate, is this giant octopus of an organization, and every tentacle starts spinning up level of effort and work and maybe their own de facto process and procedure that may not complement something else in the organization, or it's inadvertently redundant to a piece. And that's why it's so important for the big businesses to periodically do a top down or better yet, bottom up
right.
rationalization and evaluation of what's going on, and basically realign resources accordingly to hopefully cut some of that fat that might have accidentally been created over time.
Yeah.
And again, streamline operations so they can drive to the revenue and margin outcome they're looking for.
Yeah. And I think, some of those keywords you just shared is where I see small and medium size, up to, at least in my world, up to usually 100 million. I haven't worked with anybody beyond that. But it's, what is streamlining, for example, and what is efficiency? Those actually, just those two words alone, tend to be very difficult for businesses to define in terms of the 1,000 moving engine parts that need to work in synchronicity for the margins, the growth, the scale that they're looking for. And as it turns out, I really believe that those things can be distilled down into basic building blocks. Like, you take maybe 3 pillars: people, process, and then ultimately the performance outcomes. And if you can define what the pillar of people means operationally, which I would contend include things like core values, good old-fashioned org chart that is backed by clearly defined job descriptions and activities, succession planning, career path planning, right? Even if we just stopped with org chart and job descriptions alone, the ROI, the speed, the clarity, the strength the business will get just from those two alone is astronomical, right? We just finished an engagement with a construction company up here in Orange County, California. They're doing 50 million a year. They have 175 employees, and they're losing $2 million a quarter, and they couldn't figure out why. After 3 weeks of engagement, it was embedded in their org chart. They were, horribly imbalanced in terms of their resource allocation to the people they led. And their leaders had really dissolved their focus areas. And so they were wearing 17 hats each. And they had lost their focus, lost their prime activity, and they were bleeding. But right? But most businesses don't pay attention to just the good old-fashioned org chart and job descriptions, and how if you get those aligned, you get back your profits, you get back your focus, you get back your speed, you eliminate variance. And that's really fascinating. And it's so basic, and yet it is complex too. And I think having somebody that can shine a light on those components of the engine that are broken, realign them, and give them back to the business, I think is a really wonderful thing.
On that note, one of the interesting things that often happens in smaller businesses is that the boxes on the org chart don't get created intentionally, with the focus being on what value is this box going to create for the company.
That's huge. Yeah.
And instead, what an entrepreneur owner often does is they've got this feeling like, okay, it's time that I hire a sales manager, for instance. My company's grown and I can't do it all anymore. I need to go hire a sales manager. So what they do, in its simplest form, there's value to be had by having a sales manager, yes. But what they do, they go recruit. Next thing you know, they find out they've got a buddy from their, social group who is a sales guy that just lost his job and he needs a new job and doesn't know anything about your business, but he's a good guy. You've known him for years. You're confident he can help, and sales is sales. And so you hire the guy.
Yep.
Well, you would not have done a proper matching of the box without a personality in it and the full-blown job description of the value you need.
Mm-hmm.
Versus what this person's resume may have to deliver. And as good a guy and great a friend as this person may be, the ultimate truth is they're not a good fit for that box on the chart in that moment. Yet the hire gets made, you go to work, and all of a sudden you're not achieving what you had hoped to achieve with the move.
100%. I would say if let's say what you described, if you were the business owner, you and I, or let's say we're listening to somebody tell the story, you and I would clearly see that because the business didn't define what they value and how that relates to job descriptions, then they're at the mercy of hiring a macro title. They're at the mercy of saying, if that person is a salesperson, then clearly they must be able to help us. But then the people show up, they don't have instructions, they don't have guidelines, and they just do their own thing. And that's, to your point, it's a big area of struggle and pain and failure in businesses. It reminds me of that old quote that I think is the biggest lie to business owners and businesses that are looking to scale and grow, which is hire great people and set them free. And when you do that carte blanche, what you do is you try to build a cake business without forcing every cake to follow the same recipe. And you then have variance, and now you don't have quality control, and you have no control of the business.
Yeah. No, that's such a great thing. Well, Garrett, you mentioned while we were in the green room that you, over time, you've developed some tools and I guess programs and measures for these sorts of things. Tell us a little more about that.
Yeah, happy to. Well, again, this came as a result of me being unable to find operational scaling tools in the marketplace. And so I decided to build them myself. And that culminated into business solutions we call FAST, FAST Business Solutions. And FAST is an acronym, which is spelled FASTT. It stands for Frameworks, Assessments, Systems, Tools, and Techniques. And we have around 40 of these modules, these tools that we use. But one of them, for example, is called the Quad Core Management Framework. And what that does is it gives businesses a blueprint to load balance their management leaders into 4 areas to produce hyper focus and strength. And those 4 areas, by the way, are strategic, maintenance and support, process building, and project management. And I suspect if you and I had a chance to have some coffee together, we both would agree that what leaders and business owners typically do is they find great people and they just overload them. And they make them be all things to all people. They put them in charge of strategy. They put them in charge of measuring, maintaining, and supporting. They put them in charge of project management. And they also expect them to go build process. It's too much. But this is what we do. And so QuadCore, for example, gives businesses literally a blueprint to follow to organize their people so that they get hyper-focus and strength. There's one example. Another framework we have is called P3. It stands for People, Process, and Performance. And inside of, I mentioned that earlier, and inside of each of those pillars are a series of tools that we give businesses to use, architect, and ultimately manage for the outcomes they're looking for. And the reason people is the first one, the first pillar by design is, I believe fundamentally, great companies are built first and foremost by great people. You know, the businesses, even with the advent of AI and into the future, it will be people developing and driving that technology. And so you have to, I believe, if you want to build a great company, you have to demonstrate care for the people by preparing for them all the things they need to succeed. And then that parlays into building process around that foundation so that when they begin to execute, you eliminate variance and you create control. And I say that in a good way, not a bad way, and then ultimately, as that process becomes outcomes, the performance component is measurable rails, which again, these are tools we provide to empower businesses to measure what they do, because you can't manage what you can't measure. And then that becomes a life cycle inside of there. And all of these tools become the levers to guide and guard the business into its, hopefully, future vision and mission.
You know, it's interesting. I love your P3 model. In fact, I feel like we're brothers from another mother. I have a 4P model that has those same three: people, process, and performance. But I added product to the framework.
You did.
And my argument there is that I think you need to be mindful of what it is you're trying to produce, and this is maybe not a tangible product, but maybe if you're in a service business, that's still your output. And the idea being is I dial that into that 4-pillar framework, because you have to understand what it is you say you're going to produce so that you can influence all those other 3 things. And, without, at least in my mind and the way I've always pitched it, without the product consideration, a couple of things happen. Number one, your initial product may be great, but the market has told you it needs to be slightly different by a factor of X. You need to do this other thing. It needs to have a 5th wheel, or it needs to have a, electric windows, or I don't know, whatever. But it's accounting for the market feedback on what you're producing so that then you can recalibrate all the other 3 Ps accordingly.
I appreciate that.
And I think it's important. And I've struggled for a long time to figure out a name for my model. There are a lot of P models out there in the business world, which I certainly respect and appreciate. I've ended up for small business owners, I call my package the edge. If you get all this working in the right direction, you're definitely going to create an edge for your business and the opportunity to become that growth model that you would like to have.
Yeah.
So
maybe just riffing on your idea. What I saw when you were describing product is maybe product is the vehicle, and it's the 3 other Ps that are working in unity to keep moving that vehicle forward and transitioning and flexing and maneuvering as the vehicle pursues its
Yeah.
end goal.
Yeah.
But I do agree with you, by the way, 100%. No argument here. I think the product market fit and whatever it is, service or product you're producing, must always, or the other three P's must subordinate to that. That goes without question.
Yeah. So let me drill into the performance thing a little bit. This is a topic that always comes up. A lot has been written about KPIs and OKRs.
Yeah.
And most people glass over, most business owners, when you approach them and start talking about that, the vast majority of them scratch their head and go, I have no idea what you're talking about. What are you getting into? But my main question, having said that, is talk to us, if you will, about your thinking on lagging indicators versus leading indicators for where the business is going.
Yeah, sure. So, listen, I think leading indicators are on the front side in the engine room, and I think they relate to what I call SQT: speed, quality, and turnaround time. And so if, and a KPI is the measurement of that, it's a reaction to what you should have been doing accurately internally and while you build for the outcome. And so, if any business can understand SQT, and then architect the reoccurring activities in their business, whatever they are, that produce their end results, they will be of the 1 percentile, in my opinion. The lagging indicators on the other side, of course, I actually think a KPI is a lagging indicator in terms of outcome, but also, your CSATs. Another great example of a reaction to what you have already done right or wrong. Another thing would be customer churn, especially if you're in the recurring revenue business, or just a product sale in general, looking at increase or decline. Those typically will be indicators that you have your engine operating successfully or inefficiently. In terms of market domain, I think another is on the recurring revenue business, which I have a mostly experience with, is, and I don't know if I mentioned it, but customer churn, where they stop coming back, and understanding why that happens. So at a high level, those are a few thoughts on the indicator.
Yeah. On that note, I have a colleague, a business coach that is really big on encouraging owners to very rigorously do customer surveys, stay in touch with your existing customers, asking them questions like, why us? Why did you choose us? What is it about what we do that is appealing to you? And as he describes things in kind of a macro way, he says it's interesting that often it's not about the actual product itself, but it's the process to take an order, deliver an order, fix a defect, or respond to a customer service inquiry. It's all of those umbrella things, or the icing around the cake, that is important. And it is interesting that that's the bulk of the feedback. Or people may say, well, you've got a great product, but it's a pain to get one. It's so hard to do.
Right.
That's
you mind if I comment on that?
Please.
I just think it's so great. We know the power of brand is, how does the brand make somebody feel? And typically what I've seen is when a brand makes somebody feel yucky, it's due to bad customer service, delays. It's very difficult to use or complex to use, right? It's not easy to use. And a whole host of these sort of yucky feeling producing experiences along the way. And the reason I just agree wholeheartedly is because typically, especially in the US, good enough tends to be great. You could have a good enough hamburger stand with an amazing brand and great experiences that you produce, and win, contrary to just this past Sunday, I stepped into a brand new, I'm not going to give the name, but a brand new little sub shop. They have a great reputation, maybe not in the future. I was there for 3 minutes. I walked in to order a sandwich. Within 3 minutes of ordering my sandwich, a lady walked in and said, "Excuse me," and it's really tight in there. She said, "Excuse me, your Dr. Pepper is producing colored soda water. I just want to let you know, do you mind if I get something else?" He's like, "Oh my gosh, yeah, I'm so sorry." She grabs it, she leaves. I kid you not. Right in the corner, there's another lady waiting for her sandwich. She sort of speaks up loudly to the people making her sandwich. She says, No. I don't want lettuce and tomato. Please, could you make it over?" And they got all flustered, right? And then they finally delivered. The guy that was in front of me went to go get his sandwich. He grabbed it, unwrapped it. They forgot to cut it in the middle, right? And so they had to take the sandwich back. This is within 3 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Clearly, that is going to have effect on the business, on the returning customers. If it's constantly painful to get what you want, you don't go back. You don't go back.
Right. No, it's not. And, to your point, I actually did an interview with a gentleman that was one of the executives of the Hard Rock Cafe for many years. He since left, but for like 20 plus years, he worked with the growth of that chain.
Yeah.
And it's on record on my show. I've got it in the archive. He said, "Our hamburgers aren't that great, but people come for the atmosphere. It was the experience and all the memorabilia and all the, tchotchkes that are around." And he said, the word he used was, we are, or were and are, a culture of broken toys. The people we hire, your waiter's probably going to have tattoos and probably going to have a piercing somewhere.
Sure.
Their hair may not be a natural color, but there is an environment created to allow those people to thrive as human beings and enjoy what they're doing. And that was their intent from a people and culture standpoint. They wanted to champion that idea, unlike some chains who will tell you, "We don't want to see ink on your arms. If you've got tattoos, you need to wear long sleeves,"
Right.
There are those kind of dichotomies out there in the world. But it was a fascinating interview to talk with him about what they tried to do from a culture standpoint.
Sure.
What they tried to build in their brand identity.
Yeah. And I suspect, not having the best hamburgers on the planet, but that atmosphere, like you mentioned, I bet they also probably deliver the burgers pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So great experience, fast delivery. They could charge also triple the amount for a burger.
Exactly.
That anybody else would, and still win.
Was it the world's best hamburger? No. And they admit it. They were not ashamed. Obviously, they don't advertise that, but if you ask them, they say, "No, that's not what we're going for here."
Right.
And again, what you said a moment ago, good is okay. You want a good hamburger when you go there. Is it the best one you're ever going to taste? Maybe not, but you go there for a whole different reason.
Yeah. On that note, regarding good enough, one thing we saw repeatedly in my businesses historically is when we goofed as a business, and we received a complaint, if we were fast, like almost immediate to respond, acknowledge, and pursue a fix, they actually left not as detractors, but as advocates.
Mm-hmm.
right? Because that is the exception, not the norm. And
That's right.
people want that. And if you put a little bit of elbow grease at your core value level and integrate that into a mission for your leaders, for example, this is one of many areas of business, you begin to win. You outbeat your competition even with a good enough product.
Right. Right. No, I agree. And I've argued that for a long time. And it goes back ultimately to my days in banking. I always felt that we did more to assert our brand when something went wrong than we did when everything was going right.
Oh, right.
And if in our case, our bank, we advocated or we presented ourselves as a customer's bank. And our ad campaigns always showed our bankers out in the field. I mean, walking through a manufacturing plant or through a warehouse or on a job site or in a building, but not in our office, in our fancy mahogany desks. You never saw that in any of our ads.
Wow.
You saw the guys out with hard hats on and maybe work boots and reflective vests, safety vests, and that sort of thing, walking with a customer. And that was just our brand that, we were a customer first bank. And what that meant was when a customer called and said, "Hey, Doug, I got a problem, man. I screwed up. I overdrafted my account. I did X, Y, and Z. What can you do for me?" When we said, "Got it. Thank you for calling. We'll help take care of that." And there were banks we competed with that said, "Well, shame on you. You owe us an extra $35 because you bounced the check." And we didn't do stuff like that.
Got it.
Yeah. At least not on the customer that was already a reasonably, solid contributor to our success. And by the way, we had an internal system that measured that. We knew the margin contribution on every customer of the bank. You could look it up on the computer.
No kidding.
When the phone rang and you hadn't heard from this customer in a while, in seconds, you could dial them up and you could see what their history with us was.
Yeah.
And we used that to make business decisions about what we would or wouldn't do for a customer.
It's great.
And we were not afraid to fire customers. We did do that. That was a thing I learned back in those days.
Sometimes you have to.
After a long period of very poor performance and basically being a drag on our numbers, we would invite somebody to go down the street to the other bank and take their stuff with them.
Yeah. When you said that, I was like, oh my gosh, understanding from a business perspective that sometimes you need to fire your customers. But I immediately was reminded of at least, I think, another big challenge in business today. And that is leadership has, in my opinion, bought the narrative and swung so far to be kind and nice at all cost to the company's people that they forget about the company needs to profit and people need to do their job in order to succeed. And I think sometimes, you need that, position towards the business internally as well for success. You know what I mean? I don't want to use the F word in terms of employees. That might come out wrong, but balancing that discipline in a business, I think, is on both sides is also really important.
Yeah, and under that umbrella of the people part of your three-part model there, having the right people doing the right job is important. And once somebody makes it into the payroll and then demonstrates they're not a good fit for what you need in that role, the other popular phrase I've heard is we hire too fast and fire too slow.
Sure.
And I think there's much to be said about that because, again, it it conjures up this idea that you need to know what that box on the chart is going to produce for you, what value it's going to bring, what are the job requirements and skill sets and behaviors necessary. But if it takes you a while to hire for that so that all boxes are checked and everything's working right, that's a better move than just taking the first warm body that comes in the door for an interview and say, oh, you look like you might work. Because then if within days they prove they can't do the job, typically we let them hang around. Well, let's retrain them and let's try this. And well, why don't you go over there and do that? And that'll be okay. And we can get through this. And you get when they're not fulfilling what they were hired for, you got to act on it quickly.
Yeah. And I don't know what you've seen, but part of the reason why I'm just really digging and enjoying and so satisfied with the work at Clarity Ops is the challenge with, at least from what I've seen and experienced in running businesses, the challenge with that scenario is actually most businesses don't give their people clear instructions on what to do, how to do it, and when to deliver it. And so even great people end up falling short and get blamed for not doing their job. But the truth of it is, if the business were honest, the business did a really bad job about defining their job, right? But they still point the finger. And so what I love about clarity at the job description level is, and then clarity at the process level, is you actually can measure and objectively see when somebody doesn't do what they were hired to do. And then rather pointing a finger at the person, the leadership or the manager who's in charge of maintaining and supporting gets to lock arms with the person, and they together get to point at the process and say, what was missed here? Does the process need to be fixed? Or was the process not followed? In either way, we look at that and go, okay, let's calibrate. And now the person that was responsible for doing that doesn't feel attacked. They feel supported. They feel mentored. And they also understand this is an accountability conversation.
Agreed.
Right? Yeah. And dude, that is, everybody's winning on that.
Yeah.
Everybody's winning on that.
I love it. Well, Garrett, we're about up on time. I really thank you for sitting in and sharing all this with us. Tell people the best way to get a hold of you if they're interested in knowing more.
You bet. Yeah. Thank you, Doug. So I'm on LinkedIn. Garrett Delph is my handle. And then of course our site is ClarityOps.co. .com was like 50 grand.
Yeah.
So if you put in .com, you won't find us, but .co, and lots of content there. And of course, if anybody's interested, contact us. Be happy to help.
That's great. Well, again, thank you for that. And as always, folks, we're going to have those links in the show notes. So please do hop down and check out Garrett and his work at Clarity Ops. I'd like to remind you that we do have a video version of this show over on YouTube, channel by the same name, Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Hop over there, check out the archives. We're coming up on show 400, not too long away. So looking forward to that milestone. And I do want to tell you that by the time this show is released, we are going to be deep in the middle of an offering that I'm doing. I'm calling it Vision 25. It's a 6-part coaching package that I provide one-on-one to business owners and leaders who are looking to really get into the new year with a whole new lens on clarity and vision, to use the word that Garrett introduced, reminded us of, clarity. It's one of my favorite words for what leaders need to be doing. But if you want to know more about the Vision 25 offer that I've got going on right now, hop over to my website at dougthorpe.com. There will be a link there that you can learn more and talk to us about your interest in being part of that one-time offering. But with this, we're going to sign off, say goodbye, go out there and make it a great day.
You've been listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense, hosted by Doug Thorpe. If you would like to know more about the coaching and advisory services he provides, visit dougthorpe.com.